And we're live! Welcome to the Grade 10 season finale of the Kelvin Dueck Science Show Extravaganza. Here's your host, the Gretzky of physics, the Usain Bolt of acceleration. It's Kelvin Dueck!
I should do this whole lesson in mime, just typing, and the only voice they would hear was it. Now, we'll go. Ready? The topic is how an introduced species can affect an ecosystem. This has really become a problem since the invention of the airplane. Did I miss you guys? You have to go already? Okay. Give me 1 second, pausing the video that quick.
Have to do this again?
No. Let's keep going. So, two terms for you. Dylan, first of all, we have what we call a native species. A native species, those are the plants and animals that naturally inhabit an area, but more and more, specifically since the invention of the airplane. It started with the invention of ships because we took animals with us on ships, but usually you could easily control what animals were getting on a ship. With an airplane, especially small insects and bugs, you have no idea what snuck into the cargo hold, and then it hops off at its new destination. We call these introduced species, plants or animals that are intentionally or accidentally introduced to a region where they didn't previously exist. And some of them have been introduced to North America so long ago that you think they're native. As an example, starlings, those birds, are not native to North America, even though they're everywhere. Starlings, an Englishman who loved Shakespeare tried to bring over to North America from England every single bird that's ever mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. And most of them promptly died. But he brought, I believe it was 6 starlings in like 1930. They did well. I believe there's 200 million estimated in North America now, starting out from those 6. And most of you, having grown up with them, probably assumed, oh, starlings are native to North America. No. Potatoes, not native to North America, even though we grow them all over the place. That's an introduced species. Some are beneficial. Most are not. These are also called foreign species, or the other word, yes, is invasive. Specifically, invasive is used to refer to species that we would prefer not to be here anymore. So an invasive species, organisms that take over the habitat of native species, or if they don't take over the habitat, Amy, they may just weaken their bodies because they don't have to be the same size. They could be some kind of a parasite or something like that, weakening their immune system, weakening their ability to eat. Short video. So, The Simpsons, sadly, were more accurate than we realize. How do these introduced invasive species affect ecosystems? Well, first of all, competition. They may compete for either the same food sources as natural species, as native species, or the same nesting areas. Predation is the next one. An invasive species may eat native species that have never learned to defend themselves against this introduced species. They may spread disease. They may bring diseases from other places that local species have not developed any immunity to. Humans, we're dealing with that all the time. Every time you hear about one of these strains of flus, often they're coming from places where the people there have developed an immunity. We haven't. Parasites. If you've done any serious world traveling, in particular if you've gone to South America or Africa or parts of Asia, you've had to get shots, and you have to be careful because you may pick up a friendly parasite and bring him home or her home with you. Animals as well. And the other one is habitat alteration. It may not be necessarily, Hayden, that an invasive species will interfere with the native species, but maybe they eat nothing but pine trees, and there are a bunch of native species that need the pine trees. Okay. So let's look at each one of these. Brad, you want to give him an elbow? He could use it. Is he going to make it? Okay. You going to make it, kiddo? Is he asleep? Is he okay? Give him a gentle note. Yeah, okay. No, it's okay.
Yeah? Okay.
No, we're good.
Okay.
So, competition. While the native species have an established balance, the invasive species can throw off this balance by competing for essential resources. Food sources, nesting sources, just land itself, space to live. Predation. The invasive species may have a huge advantage, as the native species may have no methods to fight or escape. For example, this may be the best named species I've ever heard of. So, for example, this is their actual name. This is great. Yellow crazy ants. And just by looking at the name, I think you've just realized the story behind their naming. Oh, I say, look at these ants. They're yellow. They're going crazy! I'm guessing it was something like that, right? Yellow crazy ants. They escaped from cargo ships in West Africa, so they're native to West Africa. When people were loading things from West Africa, there was some ants in the cargo. And among other things, they devastated the red crabs on Christmas Island, which is in Australia, part of Australia. They have killed an estimated 20 million. They just swarm the land crabs, and the land crabs have no natural defenses. They get covered with ants, and the ants kill them. To the point where there are very few crabs now in that ecosystem. This is just one example. I picked it because, oh, what a great name for a species. Disease and parasites. You can kind of lump these together by weakening certain species. Other less dominant species can outcompete other species, significantly changing ecosystems. For example, how many of you know what a lamprey is? This thing right here. What is it? They're disgusting, by the way. What is it?
One of those fish with a little light.
Close, actually.
Or it was like more eel-like.
Okay, so a lamprey, it's a tubular, and we're going
Suction on
to,
it.
yes.
With the teeth.
Okay, a lamprey, we're going to call it a fish because it lives underwater and it breathes water, but they don't quite look like normal fish. They're shaped very much like an eel. The front of their face, just imagine a round circle with hundreds of teeth. And all they do is they suck blood from other fish. They dive swimming towards a fish. They hit the side of it. The hundreds of teeth fasten in. They have a very, very sharp, raspy tongue like a saw that cuts through the skin. And they stay there for a while. I can see a few. They invaded the Great Lakes in the 1880s, and it's completely changed the Great Lakes ecosystem. If you want to see a picture of a lamprey, you can turn to page 180 if you want to. They're not pleasant-looking fish, although lamprey pie is apparently a delicacy among some people. I don't know. I'm not into fish pie. I imagine it might taste good. But yeah, hey, they're... Ugh. They are kind of cool. They're vampire fish, sort of, except... Yep. So if you turn to page 170, you can see one if you want to take a quick look at a picture. Page 140. What did I say? 170? Page 140. Yeah, page 1. I think it's page 140, isn't it? I hope. Yeah. And you can see the row of teeth. Like, yeah, Leah's wrinkling her nose. Yeah, I would not want to be swimming and have one of those start approaching me. You think leeches are bad? Far worse. Oh yeah.
They put up those little blocks now in the Great Lakes River. It's like a little block like that because they can't get up the.
Got a video. So Hayden was saying they're spending money to try and prevent the invasive species from entering the Great Lakes. Absolutely, that's a major issue, especially in the U.S. So disease and parasites. Habitat alteration. So habitat alteration can change the physical structure of the ecosystem. Quiet, please. I know it's a cool picture, but how? Maybe they dig up things that they shouldn't, burrowing, blocking sunlight, changing the chemistry. There's all sorts of ways that non-native introduced species can change things. So I have this level. Here are some examples that we're dealing with in BC. So Eurasian milfoil, this was originally brought to North America, we think in the late 1800s. It was first identified in BC in 1970 in Okanagan Lake. It's a very highly adaptable plant. It thrives in disturbed and contaminated waters. If any of you go through the borders, you'll notice next to the borders there are signs posted right away. If you have a boat and you've been in water, stop, wash off your boat, wash off your propeller. They're trying to prevent the spread of milfoil. Okay? It can grow from plant fragments, which are often spread out by boats in the Okanagan. It's controlled by literally rototilling to cut out roots from lake bottoms. They literally plow up the lake bottom. That's money that we have to spend now, which was preventable. Just don't bring it in the first place. The Norway rat. So these invaders may have escaped from early European explorer and fur trading ships. Rats are extremely well adapted to almost any environment. They eat almost anything. A female rat can produce up to 72 young per year. So on the Queen Charlotte Islands, for example, islands are the really bad ones because there it's an isolated population. Probably the species have been in isolation for thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of years. They've really identified and adapted niches. They don't deal well with invasive species. So birds, ground nesting seabirds are particularly at risk in the Queen Charlotte Islands of the Haida Gwaii. American bullfrog. So bullfrogs were brought to BC in the 1930s as a source of frog legs for restaurants. How's the frog leg industry doing? Dane's saying not very well. So what did they do? Oh, they just chucked them into the wild. They didn't kill the frogs. They thought they'd be nice. Oh, I'll let them go. Well, no, they've spread dramatically all the way down to southern Oregon. They began to breed rapidly. They've taken over habitats in the southwest. They've eaten so many native frogs that they've made the red-legged frog an endangered species. They can become huge. On southern Vancouver Island, again, an island situation, bullfrogs and their tadpoles are removed as quickly as possible from an area. We're hoping to prevent them from taking over Vancouver Island. The European starling. So the starling has caused the decline of several bird species, including the yellow-billed cuckoo, the western bluebird, and the hand-tailed pigeon. In the late 1800s, 50 breeding pairs were brought to North America, and boy, did they breed. I think it's up to 200 million starlings is estimated in North America. Okay. Those are some examples of some invasive species. A couple of videos for you. So what's your homework? Number 1, number 2, we talked about those definitions in class. Number 3, we listed some. In fact, we listed 5 ways. Now, to do these questions here, what you want to do is you want to look in your textbook, starting on page 138, where they start talking about different types of invasive species. They give a bunch of examples. So they talk about the leaf-feeding beetle. They talk about a bunch. If you just look at each paragraph, they mention one example. I didn't include all of them in our notes. So it says, list 3 examples of introduced invasive species that have had an impact in ecosystems. You can certainly use 3 from the big chart that I gave you at the end of the notes. On Vancouver Island, it says 3 invasive species have dominated the plant cover. You can look at page 143 to get more information about that, and that's where it talks about Scotch broom and why it's such a difficult species to control. How many of you have been to Vancouver Island and actually seen where they have a section measured off, and it says invasive plant species under control here, right?
They had us cut it out, actually.
They had to cut it, like
Yeah,
what?
our group cut out a lot of that.
Oh, you guys actually
Yeah.
helped out as part of that
Yeah.
with cadets?
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. It's an issue. And so it's not just, don't just think animals, plants as well. Trees, species, anything living. And then you can try the back. I think every question here is fair game. Again, when they're asking for specific examples, look at the textbook. And I'll talk about these tomorrow. Then the second thing I gave you, this is my unit review. So this, like any review, is going to be worth 20 marks, not 10. Which questions are fair game? I'm going to tell you which ones you don't need to do. So number 1 is fine. 2 is good. 3 is good. 4 is good. 5 is good. 6 is good. 7 is good. 8 is good. 9 is good. These are all vocabulary words. This is great practice for the provincial as well. What is the process? 8 is good. 9 is good. 10 is good. More questions? Yeah, the matching is fine. Oh, good. I did nuke number 22B already. So what's the explain the relationship between the cedar trees and the moss? So what's the difference between an ecosystem and a habitat? You can answer that. Here's a food web. We talked about food webs. I haven't tested you on it, but this is from chapter 2. Yep. I don't know. Did I give you a schedule with everything for the rest of the year on it? A little half piece of paper? I think I did. Okay. So you can do this one. Yeah, 24 is fair game, I think. 25 is fair game. Sure, 26, I think you can figure out. 27, many species of fish are overexploited. What is we did that. You know what? Actually, you can nuke 27, so cross out 27. You can cross out 28B. 29 and 30 are okay. And I did attach the answer keys, yes? So you can look at your answers and kind of figure out what they're getting at if you're stuck. But you should try these yourself first. So you have the remainder of class to work on this. And that, my friends, brings the course to an end.